Good morning. For those of you that don't know me very well, my name is Kylie Leonard. I'm the Associate Publisher at Australian Defence Magazine Group. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Welcome to the inaugural ADM Women in Defence and National Security Breakfasts. Thank you to our event sponsors, Dassault Systèmes, for believing in the idea, taking a leap of faith, and for working with the ADM team to make it happen. This breakfast is the first in a series of events that are planned for all over Australia, each with a different theme and format, but all focusing on a single issue or topic that directly impacts women. But before we get down to the serious discussion and the real reason we're all here today, I thought we'd have a bit of fun with ChatGPT and Claude. I asked them both to help me design an Australian Defence Industry Diversity and Equity Inclusion Program, a DEI policy, but with a twist. Do it only in emojis. Here's Claude AI. It brands itself as an ethical AI respondent. It basically said, no, too hard, too serious, can't do it with emojis. So after a bit of persuasion, it came up with this. We got some infographics and some detailed information. And then it got overly excited. It invented its own email address, its own 800 help number, and its completely fictitious website. So if there's anybody from Defence here and you want to claim that, might want to get on it now. ChatGPT had no problem whatsoever. It said, here you go. So apparently Defence is a shield. And we get down, there's good points in there. It's really not too bad. Right. Then I said, let's get a little bit more fun. Rewrite it for Gen Alpha and for an audience of over 55-year-old men. At this point, Claude AI absolutely spat the dummy and crashed. It just said, no, can't do it, too much information, overload, and died. ChatGPT, on the other hand, came up with this for our Gen Alpha group. And my favourite bit is down the bottom. Defence needs you just as you are. So it was really quite sweet. Let's talk about how we feel. It's very touchy-feely. You ready for it? Men over age 55. Clear, respectful, grounded, with a formal tone, but with emojis. I don't get how the two are compatible. And down the bottom, this is about building a workplace that reflects our values: integrity, mateship, and mutual respect. So they've got a long way to come, but that was just a bit of fun. All right, so frivolity aside, we're here today to discuss AI everywhere, the new normal. Artificial intelligence is everywhere, from the sensors on the car wipers as you turn them on when it rains, the air conditioner that only functions when there's someone in the room, to generative artificial intelligence, Gen AI, such as ChatGPT, Claude, and some others, and that occasionally helpful AI summary that now appears at the top of every Google search. AI is being used to generate code, predict the weather, a source of content, a companion, a muse, a sounding board for ideas, the next stage of internet searching, a replacement for a therapist, and other ways its developers never quite imagined. So why does gender matter when talking about AI? According to a survey conducted by the New York Times, women make up just 26% of the global AI workforce. In any workplace or field where input from women or any minority group is lacking, and less account is taken of their views, needs and experiences, the outcomes are always less than optimal. An AI model is only good as the information that is used to train it, and the parameters it develops from those inputs are only as good as the weights and suggestions programmed into the model. These are all tasks performed by a human programmer, each with their own worldview. A 2024 study by Berkeley Haas Centre for Equity, Gender and Leadership analysed 133 AI systems over a multi-year period, finding that about 44.3% of them showed gender bias, and 25.7% exhibit both gender and racial bias. So how does AI impact women on the workplace? A study published on the 20th of May, so very recently, by the International Labour Organization and Poland's National Research Institute found that 25% of jobs worldwide are potentially exposed to transformation by Gen AI. That figure rises to 34% in high-income countries such as Australia. The jobs that are at highest risk of automation by AI make up 9.6% of the female employment compared to just 3.5% of male employment. According to yet another study, yes, there are a lot of them, This time by HR Services and Recruitment firm Randstad showed that only 7% of women received AI training in the workplace compared to 17% for men. Research by Delegates found that 50% of women use some form of Gen AI in the workforce compared to 70% of men. All of this and more is why AI Everywhere, the new normal, is the subject for today's breakfast. With those sobering thoughts in mind, and before I bore you with yet another study or more statistics, it is my great pleasure to hand over to Gwen Cohen, the Director of Public Sector Alliances at Dassault Systèmes. Gwen has over 20 years' experience specialising in the public sector, energy, infrastructure and materials. She is a distinguished leader, recognised for her contributions to digital transformation, sustainability and the development of sovereign capability. In her role as the Director of the Public Sector Alliances at Dassault Systèmes, she is instrumental in forging partnerships and pioneering initiatives that foster innovation in cities and public, aerospace and defence, and energy and materials sectors. She has a particular focus on the development of critical raw materials, enhancing advanced manufacturing, and ensuring infrastructure resilience. Additionally, she oversees the alliance strategy for the Asia-Pacific South region, which encompasses Singapore, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Australia, and New Zealand. Gwen serves as a non-executive director for Lithium Valley WA, the Australian Microgrid Centre of Excellence, and Barradon Cells. Can you please welcome Gwen to the microphone?
All right, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So, and I'd also like to recommend this beautiful artwork by a local custodian lady who's 23 from Victoria. I thought that was a fabulous picture. So thank you, Kylie, for inviting me and reminding me how to use the clicker. As you mentioned, we're here today to talk about the future of defence and the transformative impact of AI on our armed forces. I guess it goes to say that inclusive design, planning, workforce development are all being impacted very heavily from AI. But before we get started on this journey, I wanted to take a moment to provide some context about why Dassault Systèmes is relevant, or what their heritage and pedigree is within defence. I should, in full disclosure, say I am not a member of the Defence Force, although my husband served for about 30 years, so I'm adjacent. I participate in many barbecues and discussions of stories of back in the day, so I'm kind of conversant. But that's probably not a reason to present. The main reason we're here today, from my point of view, is because of Dassault Systèmes. And I spoke to Karen earlier today over coffee and told her the softer version, or the historic version for Dassault Systèmes, which I wasn't going to include in today's session, but I think I will. So Dassault Systèmes, if you haven't heard of us before, we're a French company. It's still owned primarily and run by the Dassault family, which is quite an unusual thing. It started by a lovely fellow about 100 years ago called Marcel Bloch, good Jewish boy. He actually solved in World War I the timing problem between rotors and bullets. So in the Battle of Britain, for example, that was very handy to be able to shoot and fly at the same time. So being a core contributor to technology shifts that impacted defence is pretty good. So he was able to build his company to create aircraft on the back of his contribution to World War I, which is fabulous. We today still build planes, the parent company does, so the Mirage, the Rafale, the Dassault Falcons are still manufactured and designed by us. So from World War I to World War II, he built his manufacturing capability, and then along comes World War II, and France obviously isn't doing so well at this point. In come the Germans and say, good news, you're going to start building German planes. He said, bad news, I'm a good Jewish boy, I'm not building any German planes. So they sent him to a concentration camp. This is a bad bit. And his wife was interned in Paris. But his brother James joined the resistance. And his code name in the resistance was Dassault, which is to attack, to assault. End of World War II comes around. Marcel makes it, his wife makes it, and unfortunately his brother James does not make it. So in honour of his brother, Marcel renames the entire family and the family business Dassault. So still controlled by the now third generation, as well as the founders for Dassault. So one of the sons from the original founder came about 40 years and said, you know, we make planes and I'm drawing planes on paper, but I don't want to draw, you know, I want to see the plane, and I think we can do it. I think we can make a three-dimensional plane. And they're like, nah, don't worry about it, just keep building the planes. Anyway, he was persistent, so he kept asking his father for money or investment, and eventually Marcel said, okay, you and your 5 mates can have half the money you want, and I'll introduce you to Boeing and IBM. You can work together and see if you can be the plane, make the plane, see the plane. And in fact, they did. So for each 10 years of Dassault's history, or to this day, they set goals and objectives and ambition. So that first one was, I wanted to be able to make 3D components. And that was the first three-dimensional CAD piece of software that was developed. So the part of Dassault I work in is Dassault Systèmes, which is this software component or engineering software. The next 10 years they took the component and they decided that they wanted to make the structure of the entire plane with all of the functions together. So this is not just the surface modelling, but mechanical, electric, fluids, hydraulics in a singular model. So they worked with Boeing again to make the first virtual plane, and that plane became certified. Moving on from them, they partnered with Toyota and they took the product, the design, but this time they extended it into time. So they wanted to be able to design, manufacture, operate and maintain. So this is the fourth dimension of a product. So that's where they pioneered product lifecycle management. So there's a single piece of continuity for that product across its life. So that was pretty good. But then they set another goal for the next 10 years. They wanted to be able to see the behaviours, the context, the experience of that product. So they set about creating realistic simulation capability to be able to do things like fly the plane and see what happens in real terms, or create a city, which they did with Singapore, to be able to not only have the structure, the subterranean component, but be able to do things like heat, wind, movement of people through the city so that you could experience that environment in virtual space. So 10 years ago, they then turned inward and said, okay, well, we want that experience to be able to understand the human. So what is the physiology? What is the kinematics? How is the person being able to interact with the environment? So they've done things like the Living Heart Project, where you can go into Cedar Sinai or hospitals, you have your heart scanned, and then the surgeons can practice doing different surgical interventions or trying different pharmaceutical treatments to see which is better in virtual space, that kind of thing. And now our current ambition is to be able to look at sustainability. So how do you have circularity with all of these products? How do you do in virtual space trade-off analysis to have the least impact on the environment when you still need the outcome? So that's what Dassault does. And we do that across 12 industry verticals. Aerospace and defence is one of them. So that's why I'm here to talk to you today. All right, so I will also say that I started out, before going into oil and gas, I was a cultural historian, so please forgive me. I do like to look at things backwards. My specialty was post-colonial imperialism, so I'm a bit of an old hippie. So, you can't take the hippie out of the girl, really. So when it comes down to it, warfare and the military context has always really driven technology advancements. Whether it was when we were starting to look at basic weapons, tools, spears, or whether it became fortifications in the medieval period where we're looking at cavalry or better swords. We've got metals now. This is fabulous. We can kill each other with everything. Moving on to the age where we've brought Britannia in. We've got steam-driven ships, or we've now started to get mechanical vessels and larger weapons. We've got armaments, we've got rifles, to tanks and the mechanised fleet. Or more recently, when we've started to look at satellite information. There's always been technology innovation behind warfare, and nothing's changed. Okay, so although the context has changed, that drive to innovate is still there. If we look at what's happening today with Ukraine, even when I wrote this was quite interesting, and just this week, I don't know what that says. Just this last 2 days has been fascinating in terms of the technology shift. But what we can see from Ukraine's tech navy is that drone innovation has really been driving asymmetric advantage. They've been able to take down and make the Russian fleet flee back into the Baltic by the use of low-cost drones and innovative applications. So they've got a little canoe, they've gone and put a sticky bomb on the side and taken down, hundreds of millions of dollars of naval investment in one go. And what we're also seeing from that is that the blueprint to battlefield timescale has come down. So you're now talking less than 6 months for that. And I don't know if you were reading the news in the last couple of days, you probably were, with the fascinating result for Ukraine taking out a third of the long-range bombers. They apparently had been working on that, though, for a year. I'll give them credit. They'd snuck in woodsheds around Moscow, been putting them in back gardens. Embedded in there were drones, and then once they were all in place, little retractable roof, and boom. All low cost, all covert, all very new technology. It's a real kind of game changer in how that works. And AI is driving a lot of that flexibility. So if we look at that example and we consider the new battlefield to reality, there are a few big factors coming into play. One of those is the grey zone operation, where the battlefield, in fact, may not be disclosed at all. There may be no attribution. It may be state or non-state actors that are interacting. The battlefield may, in fact, not have anything to do with kinetic weapons. It might be, for example, economic coercion. Does that sound familiar to anybody? We might be experiencing that now. It might be disinformation. There's a lot of ways that battle will happen before an actual exchange or kinetic firing. So that has led to rapid innovation, which we're seeing in terms of those drones. So it may not be humans that are interacting. It may be done by mechanics. In this case, it's about the speed at which you can respond to that innovation. But more importantly, you can't respond with speed if you can't supply parts. So that's iterating back to the innovation. You need to design for what you can create. And you need to create things that are more clever than your adversary. So if we look forward as well, the rate of change is not expected to change, or it's not expected to slow down. We're seeing emergent technology that's going to continue to reshape the battlefield. Biological and nanotechnologies for new materials, new biological, chemical, radiological threats are being perceived. Being able to design those materials or detect those threats require AI for us to respond. Quantum computing is drastically impacting, cryptography. Being able to secure systems in the face of quantum compute is quite a challenge, I'm sure you understand. And then we're looking at the impact of directed energy weapons. You won't be running out of bullets anytime soon, but you will need to recharge. And the advanced robotics and automated systems mean that we will need to be able to respond at machine speed. We'll need to control those systems with ethical AIs to be able to make those decisions for us. So the capabilities that are changing will need to be integrated into a single operating environment. So the divisions that we would have seen in the past between the Air Force, Navy, are needing to converge into a single operation. So I suppose it then comes back to the question of if AI is behind these technologies and it's driving these advantages, do we have a common understanding of what AI is? Does anyone here in this room want to offer an explanation of what is this AI? What is it? Seems like I've watched a lot of science fiction, I'm fairly sure.
Artificial intelligence coming from a human invention.
That's
just building out of it in the best potential possibility. So although inherited problems repeating itself as well. So that's the failure part of it, that it can take over humans, but humans are always going to be humans.
Uh-huh. Well, not all humans are intelligent either, so it's a little bit of a challenge, isn't it? So you're right. Artificial intelligence is an attempt to mimic human capabilities for thinking. And really what that is machines and computers performing tasks that would normally be done by people. And it's not really witchcraft or magic. It's doing this by the use of algorithms, which are just basically step-by-step instructions or mathematical models that mimic the effective thinking or reasoning, and that may be around data analysis, it may be decision making, it may be adapting to environments. There's a lot of ways that AI can think. These algorithms, and there's many, many more algorithms than are on the screen here, are just expressions or instructions for those step-by-step methods. It might be something like an if-then pathway, like a rules-based algorithm. It might be pattern recognition or prediction for machine learning, where it's driven by vast amounts of data and it looks for patterns. It might be something like a neural network, which is a deep learning system to have a look at imagery or sensor data to try and understand what it's looking at. Or it may be iteration, trial and error being automated hundreds and thousands or millions of times to look for solutions. And we see those in autonomous systems, for example. Or it might be like ChatGPT, a natural language processor or a large language model, where all it's doing is really looking at the patterns of words and trying to guess what the next most logical word after the ones you just used might be. So it feels like reasoning, but it's not really reasoning. For AI, we take all of these algorithms and we may use one or many of them in concert. And usually what you'll see nowadays is we do consensus modelling. So consensus modelling is where you take one or many of these approaches to algorithms and you apply them in parallel or series and you wait to see if they converge on a particular outcome. So you're checking the algorithms against each other. What's important is that you are not only applying the algorithms, but you're also training the AI. So training is about having the data massive amounts of data. You can't train on something that is very new and novel. You need to be able to look at the AI models and an ensemble. So this is where you're taking those consensus models, you're looking at different algorithms, you're putting them together and distilling the information, you're co-training, you're running those algorithms against each other. And then at this next layer, you're looking at perhaps an AI that oversees or supervises that training. So you've got data coming in, you've applied an algorithm, you have another AI looking to see anomalies in the conclusions that those algorithms have put out. And then there's still a third AI sitting on top of it, looking at reinforcement. So where the supervisor has detected an anomaly, you have reinforcement learning. That's going, no, go back, you've drawn the wrong conclusion. What I want you to do is choose another path. And then there's a feedback loop, this is where humans will look at the outcomes of these three models in consultation and then tune. So you're having continuous iteration. My favourite example for illustrating the importance of training and how AI can be a little bit vulnerable comes from an application that DARPA applied in the early days of AI. They were trying to train the machine to see when an American base was being attacked. So they put out the base, and then they set up tanks and stuff and then attacked the base over and over and over and over again to get the AI to come to understand when it was at risk. And so having done many of these attacks, the code concluded that when there were clouds, there was tanks, because they hadn't really been paying attention to the weather conditions for the attacks. So it's an example of patterns. In the data, it will conclude things that you're not expecting. So shooting the clouds stops the tanks. This is probably why you might need to reinforce, you might need to reiterate, you might need to supervise an AI. So if that's what AI is, where is AI? So we say it's everywhere. What do we mean everywhere? Is it here? Am I an AI? Am I going to have a job next week? I hope so. I haven't got enough money to retire, so. Okay, so AI is not just in the domain of engineering. So in this section, I'll take a few of the key roles and try and consider what the impact of AI is to those particular roles. So if we start with the combat roles, the war fighters, AI is fundamentally changing how they are functioning on a day-to-day basis. They're evolving towards human and machine teaming, where personnel operate and collaborate with remote and autonomous systems. They're looking at drones in a warfare context. So they may be now further away from the front line, and if you consider Ukraine's example, they have a no man's zone, or a grey zone from a want of a different term, of around 7 to 10 kilometres. So they're still away from the fighting. But they still need to interact with those machines. So there's offensive components of drone, but there's the inverse problem that I think the AI are offended. That's an offensive one, I think. It's fine. It's managing the biological risk, I imagine, of the milk products. So the drone revolution is also now fundamentally changing, for example, the role of medics. So if somebody is hurt in that 7 to 10 kilometres, being able to actually get in to get anyone out is nearly impossible. So now there's a rise of medical drones to be able to pick people up and take them out for treatment. There's also a significant change to mindset and approach in the combat roles in that their OODA loops are having to be accelerated. They're making more orientation, observation, decision and act cycles based on a vast array of information coming from sources that were never available to combat soldiers in the past. And because of all this technology, because of that high demand, they're even more sensitive to sovereign supply. So it's not just, food, boots and jackets anymore. Really, the tools at the disposal are constrained by the sovereign supply chain access to those materials. In that way, engineering has become the domain of everybody, really. So soldiers are doing it, as well as people at home, whether they are actually in the military or not in the Ukraine context. Engineering is a living, breathing part of their reality. So if we look at how engineering is changing because of AI, you're really seeing model-based everything. So rather than starting with designs, which could be drawn or sketched, and then tested, you're looking at parameterization, you're looking at what are the requirements, what are the functional and logical outcomes that I want, okay? And then you're taking those parameters and working with computers to be able to produce the geometry. So probably the best illustration I think I can use for this one is in traditional engineering. If I wanted to design a glass, like that water glass, I would sit down, I would sketch the glass. Okay, this is the shape I want it to be in. And then I might choose the material I want to make the glass out of. And then I will look at it and then I'll test it in a physical prototype. So I'll be like, oh, that feels good. I'm drinking a cheeky wine out of it. But, I've just banged it off the table. Maybe I'll make it thicker because it's, I want it to bounce or something like that. So it starts from a concept, gets tested, maybe fails and then goes around again. Parametric design is different in that while you do start with a shape, you have a geometry, the geometry has parameters. It must be so thick or so resilient, or it must be able to handle temperatures. So you have a shape in context, okay? You have its attributes, and then you can take that and put it in virtual space and iterate because you've constrained the geometry by your requirements, which is pretty good, okay? So you can go round and round. Generative engineering doesn't start with the shape at all. So what you say to the computer is, I need this outcome. I define my problem space. I don't draw a glass at all. I just say, I want to be able to hold this much liquid. I would like to be able to keep this liquid in that vessel even if I drop it from 1 metre high or 2 metres high. Now go away, machine, and tell me what my glass looks like. So you start to see really weird designs as a result of this. But it's a completely different philosophy for how you engineer. They're still accelerating towards AI. Eventually, you won't have to iterate it by millions of times. It will have already learnt the likeliest outcome for what you want. But that's the progression that we go from geometry to constrained geometry to iterations or generations of a problem space to having what they call, reduced order models where you can speed up the response for the design. So that's nice. That's a good shift. If you add on to that design philosophy, the virtual twin, what you're getting from engineering now is the ability to have both a virtual asset and a real asset. And this is really important because you have a design my glass that's sitting in virtual space, and then I have my real glass. The manufacturing process, the realities that you have mean that the virtual and the real object won't be exactly the same. They'll never be exactly the same. They're intended to be the same, but there will be some disparities. But because you have a virtual and a real component, you can actually tune the virtual one based on the real one. So you're taking the empirical information from that real one, you're then tuning your virtual one. Now you've got a virtual one that you can do anything with. So you can start to do things like understand predictive maintenance, remaining useful life, what dishwashing liquid you should use to keep your glass shiny. I don't know, the analogy's starting to fall apart, but you kind of get it. So that is very powerful. And then lastly, you're looking at how you iterate the design process itself. So when I said generative design isn't quite AI, this is the loop that helps it get there. Okay, so now that you've had an asset, you've run it over time, you've learnt about the disparities between the manufacturing process and the design process, you feed that back. So the next time you want to design it, you get a better design. Okay, so that's the fundamental shift in engineering. This one's a tricky one, isn't it? Okay, so intelligence and force protection. Well, of course, AI is everywhere. It's probably listening to us. I'm a bit sus about the coffee machine. Okay, so in terms of intelligence, we have so many data points, we have so much information. We would be crippled by the amount of information that we actually have if we didn't have a computer to handle it. You would have analysis paralysis. So that vast information is being collected, patterns are being recognised, and a new level of situational awareness is available to people in defence as well as ordinary citizens. Far too much information probably. And that's giving us the ability to do real-time threat detection. And this one's really important. So obviously we're taking information and we're analysing it, we're observing it, and we're overseeing it centrally. But when you have the ability for comms and a connected environment, that's great, perfect. And you've got autonomous systems sitting there that you're feeding, fabulous. But in real-time threat detection, you actually need to be able to take that big brain and put it on the little brain so that if communications break down, they still have a decision-making ability. You have to assume that in the defence context, jamming or other mechanisms for interrupting communications will happen. So the little brain on that device still needs to be able to make decisions that you trust, or you have to have instructions that will shut it down if you don't have connectivity to that device, and you have to make decisions. So these are what we're seeing in the kind of in context of sea drones, little ghost sharks sitting out in the ocean, or other loitering munitions, which are a little bit more scary, that may be guarding things. So there's a lot of impacts for AI to drive those. And that probably brings us to the cyber context. So then you have your offensive and you have your defensive components. You're looking at threat detection in terms of wrangling the AI, but you're also looking at targeting. You may be looking for malware, or you might be planting malware, which is fabulous if you know how to do these things. But you have the impact of quantum compute, which is, a never-ending challenge. So while we have such a large collection of capabilities to attack or defend, nearly all of them are going to become insecure very soon. So that's a bit frightening. Okay. So that's all good, that's AI there, and as I said, with the combat role, for example, you're only as good as the weapons that you have at your disposal which gives us a logistics problem. And I think it was Bradley, US, was it Omar Bradley, who said, you know, a novice thinks of strategy when approaching warfare. A professional thinks of logistics. So I think that's not quite exactly the right wording of that quote, but forgive me. The intention is there. So in logistics transformation, AI is playing a massive role. So you're starting to get supply chains that are smart. You've got AI optimized inventory, distribution systems. You've got autonomous drones, so you can get Amazon to come and drop you off something if you like. You've got predictive logistics, so it's trying to anticipate how long until you run out of things, where you should resupply it from, how you can create resilience in those supply chains, where are you going to manage the shortfalls for critical requirements. And really interestingly, connected to the engineering component, you have additive manufacturing. So it may in fact be that you don't need to supply parts from far away, you need to supply designs, and you need to have 3D printers to be able to generate what you can't anticipate of running out of. And I mean, they have had those mobilised in the field for decades, but the frequency of that is increasing, and the availability of designs for print and the materials that you can print, are expanding. And all of this boils down to resilience. You know, in Australia, more than most places, is particularly sensitive to this one. We may be blessed with critical raw materials and, in fact, every natural resource you can think of, but we still can't make a battery. We struggle to make much in the way of metals. You can't eat rocks. It's going to become a problem. You know, I think we've got less than a day and a half of avgas in country. These are things that should concern us in terms of resilience. We also have a lot of coast around us that might not be so easy to get through. So hopefully we fix this one. However, we have AI to help us fix it if we get to it. All right, so in terms of leadership, AI is impacting as well. We're looking at our leaders now within the military context, having to have a requirement to comprehend AI to make those faster, better, safer decisions. But they also need to understand how that information is getting to them. What is the mechanism within which those insights are being generated? How do they trust them? Can't look an AI in the eye and see if it's lying to you. So all of those indicators of twitchy, sweaty, hot mess sort of vibes aren't coming from the AI. So they need a different skill set. They need to be able to understand and rely on machines in that human system integration, but they need to be able to challenge those systems appropriately when push comes to shove. From a training, from a personnel, from a workforce point of view, we have a lot of benefits coming from AI. We have immersive and realistic training simulations that will help us bring people into new capabilities much faster. We'll be able to provide AI-powered adversaries for training simulations so that we can respond to more tactics and create more skills. We can create immersive experiences so that you can practice procedures or techniques in virtual environments with different weather patterns or terrain. We can create very complicated scenarios for training at low cost, and we can make that applicable to our current environments. So you can also feed the local industry if you want, which would be good. And then lastly, in this section, we'll look at, how AI affects human performance and optimization. We've got a lot of technology for wearable tech that is able to measure things like cognitive load. So how well is the person you're training being able to process the information or the instructions that they're being given. You can develop individual learning paths and responded curriculums for that person. We have real-time AI agents that would be able to help individual learners by giving them continuous feedback based on the gaps that they have in that curriculum. And that goes two ways. So the feedback to the learner is one, but the gaps that are being observed from the curriculum to the learner can then be fed back to the education provider to be able to tune those courses. And that then can help in skills gaps identification. So there's a lot there. AI really is everywhere. Okay, so if it's everywhere and there's a lot of robots, why do we need people anyway? I think Kylie already explained the answer, but I can't blame it. It really does matter that we have inclusivity. And I genuinely mean inclusivity. I don't just mean gender-based inclusivity, neurodivergent. People need to be included in this. It really matters what brains are training these machines. It really matters that you have the broadest set of perspectives to be able to get the best result from the technology being provided. The fact that we've shifted to more of a cognitive warfare footing, it is about hearts and minds. It is about public support. So I suppose one of the interesting, maybe controversial statements, don't tell anyone I said this, cut the videos. You know, America has had the most technology, well, let's say at least over the last 50 years more. It's had access to the most resources. You know, it's got a massive supply chain. It really hasn't won a war anywhere. Not one. It's got all that stuff. Didn't win. Possibly not going to win any other time soon. Because it matters more that you want to win. It matters that you're committed to win. It matters that you have the support of your people, and what you're trying to do is collectively bought into. That's what matters. At the end of the day, it is important that you have supply chain. You know, you need to have bullets. The best bullet is the one that you've got that they don't have. But it matters more that you are all in. And that's what we're really saying for Ukraine. It matters because they're committed, because they don't have anywhere else to go. So if we're applying AI in a military context, it matters that that AI is reflective of us and that we can all stand behind it, that its decisions are our decisions. And it has to be trained by all of us, or it won't make decisions that we are committed to. And then you won't have that kind of support. It is our greatest weapon. That decision making is critical. It matters that we apply AI to design solutions that are able to be used by all of us. So again, you know, there's programs like redesigns of jet fighter cockpits, for example, to be able to allow them to be flown by people with different lengths arms and different, muscle forces, or left-handed or right-handed. So that user-centric or universal design principle is important, because you don't know who's going to pick up that asset and have to use it. And it really matters that you trust it. So that's the guts of why diversity matters. Now, We have AI. It's everywhere. We know it needs to be fed. We know it's going to need to make decisions at a faster pace than we can respond. So this is the kind of scary point. If you think about hypersonics, for example, once a hypersonic missile is launched, by the time you pick up a phone to go, hey, Bob, I think you're probably dead. So it has to be a machine speed. You have to have autonomous weapons systems, probably with lethal capabilities, making decisions about what to do because you can't check it in real time. It won't be possible. So this brings us to the rules of engagement. There was always rules of engagement for war. There will always be rules of engagement, which is, the green card, the red card. What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do? But this time we can't pick up the phone and check those rules. And often in the past you couldn't pick up the phone and check the rules. So we have to embed these rules into our system. So how are we going to do that? So this is about setting ethical boundaries for those real-time decisions to feed the autonomous systems. Okay, now part of how we approach this is looking at multi-agent governance. So as I said at the beginning, we have not just one algorithm, you have a bunch of algorithms, you have a consensus model as your primary agent. It's handling data and it's going through a process or step-by-step instruction to conclude something. That's fine. You then have a reviewing agent overseeing the conclusions that AI is coming to. And importantly, you have an ethics agent. So you're feeding the ethics agents with international law. These are the boundaries. This is what you can do. You're checking the values are being complied with within the model. And you're transparently auditing those. So you need blockchain type technology to be able to see transparently and track the conclusions that the AI is coming to. And this is going to be a living industry. This has to happen all the time. You can't wait till there's a problem to go back and check those logs. When you look at rules of engagement, then your system, your artificial intelligence system needs to have the ability to discern. So it's drawn conclusions, and it might be something like, actually I'll take a pause for a second, walk one back. A rule of engagement might be something like, I have a drone in the air and I would like to make sure that nothing comes near me that's going to hurt me. So, drone, go and have a look and target anything with a gun. Now, if you're in Afghanistan, that's everyone. If you're in Houston, that's probably everyone. So you're going to have to get a little bit more granular than everyone with a gun. And then it's like, well, if it's everyone, it's not everyone with a gun, it's everyone with a gun with intent. So how is the AI going to judge intent? Okay, and even if, say, for example, you have, let's say, a 13-year-old girl, I have a teenager, who has a gun, probably has intent, well, maybe, let's say not a gun, but there's those days where they're just really angry. Do you really want to take them out? No, they might not, and it's not a good idea. And even if they were coming for you, what is the consequence of that? And what is the proportionate response that you should have? Do you just use your little energy weapon and zap them? That's probably not the best approach. You need to be able to feed the AI or have a rule set that's trying to understand the consequence. Even if I've seen a threat, what is the consequence of that threat? And what are the downstream implications of me managing that threat? Are they worse? If I take out the 13-year-old, Have I got the whole of the rest of the family coming at me for this? I've got the grandmothers. My God, that would be terrible. So to respond to that in an AI context, there's a component where you want to give the AI access to be able to simulate or understand the downstream consequence of the possible responses that it comes up with. One of the ways we can do that is embed the physical parameters, so model-based, multi-scale simulation. So if you have the drone and it can choose between this type of munition and that type of munition, if I choose this type, how big is the explosion going to be? What is the blast radius of it? Is it within the rule of engagement, which says, you can't hit anything more than, 5 kilometres from where I am? Or is it going to be 100 kilometres? So you give it physics-based laws to be able to think about the impacts of what it's choosing. You also give it real-world consequences or messaging. So it may be things like a blast radius, but it may also be sentiment analysis. So if I do this, am I going to be the bad guy? Am I going to get cut off my Christmas card list from the family? Obviously, we're not taking the 13-year-old out, but there's my metaphor. And then lastly, you've got the scenarios running repeatedly over and over, bringing together the physical modelling and the sentimental social modelling to be able to feed back into the AI decision-making process. So how do they know what to choose? And then you can use those parametric and generative concepts I talked about before, where you're actually constraining the possible responses. So in the last slide, I talked about how does the AI get to choose between things. You also want to limit the tools that you give it access to. So you can put in constraints to the available responding components an AI has. You can enable adaptive scenarios and simulations. As I said, you've got physics-informed compliance. And then you have that human AI teaming. So you want to be able to oversee the decision-making process that the AI would use in many scenarios before you ever put it into real use. And then you want to dynamically update the logic. Okay, so you want to future-proof this. So that means that you not only have a set of instructions for a static battlefield, but you need to be able to have rules of engagement that are able to be escalated or tiered up over time in response to the changing battlefield. So your logic that you put into the machine needs to have steps or stages. You can, sound an alarm when you see somebody come towards of a particular threat. You can buzz around but not fire at them at the next step. You could shoot over their head at the next step so far. And then you're escalating up with temporal change based on circumstance. You need to be able to infer the intent and contextual awareness. So this means that it should be able to look at proportionality. So if I intend this, so just because I, maybe have a gun and come at you and seem really mad, am I really going to do anything about that? And how am I going to tell if that's the case? And then you've got the equipment design that you're putting in and the traceability. So how do you continuously know that the system hasn't gone rogue in its conclusions? You're calibrating those, and that you're doing continuous adversarial training. So you're actually putting these systems through hundreds of thousands of made-up scenarios and continuously testing that its logic and its code isn't drifting, hallucinating like ChatGPT does. And it's only if you have all of that transparency and governance over the decision-making process, and that you're anchored in international law and ethical standards, that we'll ever be able to get interoperability across allies. So we have our AIs, and we'll be collaborating with our partners, and they'll have theirs. We need to know that they'll all act in the same direction. So making those ethical boundaries, making that rule set, making that oversight transparent, and working with our partners in that transparency is the only way we will be able to effectively work together. Okay, so that's that scenario simulation. This is, war games that we do, Talisman, etc. We'll need to do that with our AIs. We'll need to rehearse it, we'll need to stress test it, we'll need to adapt to change, and we'll need to govern it. And those humans will need to be lady humans and man humans and neurotypical and neurodiverse humans, because that's our responsibility to make sure that they are reflective of our values. Okay, and if we do that, we've talked about the interoperability, we've talked about the fact that it needs to be reflective of us, so we need to have sovereign control, and we need to have accountability. So this really is why inclusivity is strategically important. This is not a nice to have, this is not, the diversity and inclusion banner. This is critically important for our national security, for our sovereign capability, and for our strategic alignment. We need to get those numbers of inclusion up. We need to have more representation in AI. We need to have more upskilling, and we need to have more participation. All right. That seems like a lot, right? It does seem like a lot. So why am I here, and how can I help? I got a nice breakfast. That was lovely. I get to see your nice faces. That's excellent. But really, on behalf of Dassault, there's a lot of technology that we can bring to the table. Some of it, if you are happy and available to stay, there's an associated event this afternoon that kicks off for model-based systems engineering or digital engineering. So there's a lot of technology that we've brought to play. There's a couple of technology booths that are going to be opening, I can't even see, I think in about half an hour, which you'll... Yes.
They get first pick.
You get first pick. You can stress test it. You can scenario model it. You can ask some really tricky questions. So some of the technology that we have available to assist, you can play with this afternoon. Either way, I'll tell you what it is, and you can always Google it or come and talk to me about it later. So the first thing is that we have what we call the 3D experience or 3D platform, which is what we use to create 3D universes. I did mention we're a French company, so it's very fancy. Sounds very fancy. So underneath that is a common data platform where you're able to bring together information from all of the domains, whether it's scientific, engineering, sentiment analysis. There's a common structure for that information. And you're able to create that virtual twin of design. You're able to use things like the generative and parametric design to create in that space. But you can also bring together the first principle-based design with the imperial data from your physical asset and close the loop in terms of virtual and real. And that may be virtual and real planes or boats, it might be people, but it might be scenarios like logistics, supply chains, it might be optimizing those, it might be sentiment analysis. So you can bring those together into experiences. We have, of course, have our own AI, so we have a little thing called Aura that you can talk to on the platform. But we also work with Mistral and other AIs that you might find out in the public domain. You're able to do edge computing or sense computing, and then you can access information. We've got education components to be able to provide that feedback for a number of real-world skills. It's all industrial, so whether you're looking for an electrician, a welder, nuclear responder, there's a catalogue of knowledge and know-how embedded into the platform. So that's one thing we can do. We have a large array of algorithms that are contained within the solution set. Many of the buzzword bingos you can see across the top axis, but you're able to take algorithms and string them together into consensus models, and you're able to industrialise them from a pre-arranged catalogue. You can then choose from multi-domain, multi-scale simulation for first principles models. This is that ability for AI to test the consequences, so you can do that. And you've got the framework for ethical AI agents. So you have those explainable AI frameworks. You have the ability to do reinforcement training and scenario dilemma simulations. You're able to bring in sentiment analysis and look at bias. Model-based systems engineering is the subject of the next 2 days, which is very, very complicated in some ways, but really all it is being able to parameterize, to being able to specify very clearly what your requirements are, what the expected functional, logical outcomes of those requirements, what they will be, and the properties of the physical asset that you choose. So with model-based systems engineering, it's around having a continuous thread, a single source of continuity from the early stage of conceptual design all the way through to end of life of your asset. So how do you recycle it, for example? It's about being able to collaborate in that space. So you've got multiple domain experts being able to work together to workflow, raise issues, risk management, all on one platform. And from the point of view of diversity and inclusion, you can do those from different locations, so you don't have to be co-located to collaborate, which gives flexible work options. And it's giving you the ability to test the resilience of your design. So it's a framework there. And then you can look at how you can create designs that are able to work for different body types. So Dassault has the capability for what we call kinematic modelling. So you can make human replicas of different shapes and types of people that are anthropometrically correct. That word always gets me, but anyway. So you're able to see what the behaviours of your physical bodies and the different physical bodies are, and then you can test the design of equipment or machineries and make sure that all people can use that equipment, or the equipment can be designed to be personalised for a particular individual. You can test it, you can validate it, and then you can continuously improve it. I really like this picture, I have to say. And just as a little segue, one I read about last week was they've designed a nanomaterial that is soft and flexible, so you can make armours, and this is actually what they're kind of doing here. It's like chest plate. So it's flexible, fits over all the lady curves or the man curves, until it takes a percussive force. When it hits as an impact, it hardens up like diamonds. It's amazing. And I'm telling my colleagues, this is genius. And then they looked at me funny and they said, "Don't your kids play with corn flour?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "That's non-Newtonian. It's the same thing where it's soft and squishy until you bang it with a hammer." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So it's Everything old is new again. And lastly, we've got technology for immersive virtual twins. The lovely picture on the right-hand side is from our aviation group. This is how they train fighters. This is adaptive learning with AR and VR capabilities, which allows you to have personal mastery. So, that's about it. I think my brain hurts. I'm not sure if your brain hurts. But now I guess I'd open the floor up to questions, and I'd leave you with the final thought, which is all of our fancy technology, lasers, hypersonics, they're just tools. The weapon has always been the brains, and unless we increase the inclusivity of those, we're leaving half our brains at home. That's probably not the best way of us getting a good outcome. So bring your brains and let's do it. The little QR code is how you find me if you want to find me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I love AI. I love where everything's heading, and I'd love to pick your brain all day about many things you've spoken about. But my question is around trust and how we instill more trust and grow trust in AI, because I've seen we are very quick to accept a physical capability. We'll watch an autonomous ship sail into Sydney Harbour and think, yep, that's great, I trust that. But when we look at decision making, for example, and taking that out of the human bias and into the AI world based on data points and data-driven decision making, I have faced, I guess, a lot of distrust and sort of pushback of, oh, I don't trust that AI, or how do you know that decision's correct? Like you say, we can run the scenarios, we can try to prove the AI wrong and present that data, but how do we encourage more people to trust those decisions and allow them to utilise?
That's a great question. And I think at the core, it's about demystifying. It's not magic. It's not witchcraft that is coming up with these answers. You talk to ChatGPT or whatever and it says stuff. It needs to not be a dark art. You need to understand the mechanics behind it. We need to increase at a societal level people's literacy for AI. So if they can understand that it's a factor of codified instructions, you know, you've said, do this if that happens, otherwise do that. When people can see the rules, they can understand the data coming into it. You've taken away the mystery. You can then you can have conversations, you can interact with the designers of that AI to build the trust. And until you can do that, it is witchcraft, right? No, I wouldn't trust it. You need to see what's behind the veil. It's about literacy. Hello.
Yeah, doesn't it also include inclusivity? I can't say, that inclusivity.
Oh, absolutely.
So just
because the more people involved in the AI process, the end result of the AI process, we're really talking about perspectives.
Yeah, so just so that everyone can hear that, in case everyone couldn't hear that, your question was about, or your point was about, the value of inclusivity is linked to the level of trust, so that if everybody's perspectives are not respected and do not feed into the decision-making process of the AI, then groups of society will feel excluded and therefore not trust the outcome. 100%, 100%.
Okay, my turn.
Your turn, yes.
I have some questions that we've prepared for Gwen, and then we had a bit of fun with them because we asked the exact same questions of ChatGPT. So now I've just got to get rid of.
Yeah, I wrote all those notes and then I'm like, I can't even see that.
Okay, so here we go. Do you think it's possible to remove the undeniable biases that are present in current AI systems, Gen AI and medical diagnosis assistants in particular? How long do you think this will take?
About 20 minutes, no. Do I think it's possible to remove them altogether? No, because I don't think it's, even non-artificial intelligence will always have bias. Everybody's biased to an extent. I think what's more important is that you disclose them, you're aware of them, and you consciously explore those bias. Can we get the bias to be smaller than it is? Yes. Would we ever 100% get rid of it? No, I don't think so.
So you ready to hear what ChatGPT had to say? It says that AI biases stem from skewed data, historical inequalities and design decisions. And then its timeline came up with 5 to 10 years. With sustained effort. So we've all got to muck in there and make it happen, and in 5 to 10 years, no bias in an AI.
Great, so humans have been around 1.5 million years and we're still biased.
Okay, next question. Do you have any recommendations on how to increase the use of AI systems by women, given the low level of participation and trust?
Okay, yeah. Some parts of it are around STEM education.
Don't get me started, it'll never shut me up.
So there's that. There is that demystification, you know, it just is a part of everything, no matter what field, whether it's music or art or engineering. AI is a tool that all of our children, from whatever way they identify, need to be able to use. And I think it needs to be positioned in each of those domains for them to connect with it. Kids will always be different, so make it be important to them. And then statistically, 50% of those kids will be lady kids.
So 5 to 10 years.
5 to 10 years.
ChatGPT said, design for inclusivity, involve women in AI design, testing and deployment. Trust is tied to representation, control and education. These must be prioritised. It's not particularly helpful.
So a sternly worded email.
Yeah, a sternly worded email. Or a protest out on the street. Some chalk.
Oh dear. Oh,
Given current AI systems cannot accurately perform facial recognition on women or people of colour, how can any AI battle system that uses this technology be relied upon?
Well, I think I spoke about that at length. But basically, it's about that chain of command being replicated in virtual space, and transparent rules of engagement, and probably better image analytics.
So ChatGPT says they can't. Not ethically or reliably with current limitation. Military or policing systems that depend on facial recognition are at high risk. Okay, and our final question. What safeguards do we need to put in place to stop the predictive uses of AI creating a Minority Report style world?
I love sci-fi movies. I love them. Still want the interface to be like this. I want those hollow gloves or the hollow ring. That's how I want everything to be. Well, I guess the short version of that is, you know how there were the 3 kids in the pool, the women. That was all good, but they have to have consensus. It was only when the one marble got thrown away that you had the Minority Report problem. You actually have to have consensus models, you have to have transparency, you have to count all the marbles as they come out of the future prediction device. Is that the right answer?
It's an answer.
It's an answer. Otherwise, refer to the stuff I said before about oversight and AI governance.
Okay, you ready for ChatGPT? It really let fly. Legislation restricting predictive policing or social credit style surveillance. human-in-the-loop oversight, privacy-preserving techniques, i.e. federated learning and differential privacy, whatever that is, independent ethical review boards for public sector AI deployments, and the right to explanation and contestation for automated decisions. And then it went out and it decided I hadn't asked it enough questions, so it made up its own. It came up with, how do we hold AI companies accountable for the downstream impacts of their models? What frameworks can we build to ensure AI supports rather than replaces human judgment? How do we build global governance? Never going to happen for AI, especially in war, surveillance and economic inequality. How should we educate future generations to think critically and ethically about AI? What should transparency look like? Open code, open data, or open decision logs? There you go. So there's just some passing thoughts to end the morning on. So thank you very much for coming today. Keep in touch. We will have a website linked to that QR code. Oh, it's up. We do have a website linked to that QR code. So all of our upcoming events will be available on that from now on. I want to hear all the stories from women. I want to hear about all the amazing things that the people in this room, the people that you know are doing. We have a dedicated website for all this information now. And that's pretty much it. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.